Spiritualism and Women's Rights in 19th-Century America by Anne Braude. Normally I put music in the front, but as I get ready, but it's a long read, so I'm just going to get right into it. Number 9. Control copy. Control V. Select radical spirits. Done. Put a picture up and we're ready. There we go. Change. Radical. And save. While that's saving, I'll just start. Axa W. Sprague, a case study in empowerment. What's this? I wonder what she actually had. Nobody knows. In 1853, Axa W. Sprague had been an invalid for 5 years, crippled by a scrofulous joint disease. She lay confined to a darkened room in the village of Plymouth Notch, high in the Green Mountains of Vermont. The village of Plymouth Notch has been preserved much as it was in Axa Sprague's day because it became the birthplace in 1872 of President Calvin Coolidge. Coolidge was visiting Plymouth when he learned of the death of President Warren G. Harding in 1923 and took the oath of office in the front room of his family's home. The Sprague farm, which stood across the street from the Coolidge homestead, did not survive to become part of the Plymouth Notch Historic District, opened to the public by the Vermont Division of Historic Preservation. That's wonderful. Bowed down by disease, shut up from the world like a prisoner chained down in his dungeon, the 25-year-old former schoolteacher held little hope for her future. But all this is now passing away, Sprague wrote in her diary on 9 February. The chains of disease are falling off my limbs. Within a few months, Alyssa Jo Brooke Lawrence. Yo, what's up? The chains of disease are falling off my limbs. Within a few months, Sprague rose from her bed and attributed her recovery to spirits. The spirit guides that gave her the strength to rise from her sickbed also instructed her to undertake a mission that would take her far from Green Mountain home. Sprague appeared in public as a speaking medium within a year after she began to regain the use of her limbs. Her first public lecture was in the nearby town of South Reading on July 16th, 1854. What's up with you, Steph? No game tonight, buddy? She spent the rest of her life touring the country as a trance lecturer. Having been raised from a bed of sickness by spirit's agency, she wrote in her diary, I felt it my duty to do that which has been pointed out to me by my spirit guides, to take the position which I now occupy, that of a public speaking medium. No, you're injured? Damn, buddy. Can't go for that, what's the 5th title? That's a shame, man. The diary and letters of Axa Sprague provide an unusually intimate view of the inner thoughts of a trance medium, both before and after her contact with spiritualism. During the 1850s, for a woman to speak in public seemed as miraculous to many as Sprague's wonderful cure from disease. Sprague's personal papers, as well as accounts of her experiences in trance lectures in the Spiritualist press, trace the course of the concurrent miracles. What's up, Charles? Her transition from a helpless invalid confined to a darkened room in rural Vermont to a popular lecturer traveling throughout the northern United States. She provides an ideal case study of the role played by mediumship in empowering a woman to assume a public career. Thanks, buddy. The hundreds of impassioned letters. Oh, man, this is not a good book weight. I mean, it's a good book weight, but it's cumbersome. Impassioned letters she evoked from friends and admirers illustrate the impact of a trance speaker on her audience. When Sprague began her journal in June 1849, she had recently become an invalid. A joint disease, probably some form of arthritis, rendered her unable to walk and sometimes prevented her from holding a pen to write. She was 20 years old and had taught school for 8 years. Wait, she started when she was 12? Teaching school? She was 20 years old and had taught school for 8 years. That's an amazing woman. She started teaching when she was 12. That can't be right. Surrounded by invalids, Sprague chronicled both her own illness and those of relatives and friends whose health she watched anxiously as she and they underwent a variety of medical treatments. She departs from her account of illness and treatment only to comment on the book she read. Jane Eyre was very interesting. A biography of Milton made her mind wander, and to record the names of poems she wrote, like "'Tis a Hard Life to Live" and "Invalid's Dream." Invalid's Dream. Yeah, invalid. Her account is punctuated by the frequent deaths that occurred in Plymouth, including that of her 26-year-old brother, Ephraim, who returned from Boston to languish for a year before dying of consumption in 1850. In the opening entry of her diary, Sprague vents the despondency that dominates her life before spiritualism. Once more, I am unable to walk or do anything else, have not been a step without crutches since Sunday, and see no prospect of being any better. See nothing before me but a life of miserable helplessness. Sprague's only hope for a return to an active life was a cure of her physical ailments. In her constant pursuit of medical treatment, she sought both an end to pain and debility and a return to her former independence. But her experience with doctors and medical treatment only increased her despondency. Yeah, because they're awful. She grew to mistrust doctors and approached new treatments. She grew to mistrust doctors and approached new treatments with skepticism. Dr. Spencer of Clarendon also examined my case and thinks he can cure me. She wrote in her diary, I shall take his medicine, but scarce expect to receive any benefit. I have hoped until there is no chance of hope. 2 months later, when the same doctor told her that her condition was improving, Sprague responded bitterly, I shall believe it when I begin to walk. Before becoming a spiritualist, Sprague became an expert on non-religious approaches to healing in antebellum America. She sought cures from a variety of practitioners, often traveling great distances to see a doctor reputed to have success with difficult cases. In addition to taking the medicine various doctors prescribed for her, she wore galvanic bands for 6 weeks and was magnetized repeatedly by a psychologist. Her account suggests that the consumers of healthcare in northern New England in the 1850s did not distinguish between regular or allopathic physicians and their irregular or sectarian counterparts. Sprague's experience showed all forms of medical care to be costly, time-consuming, and ineffective. Disillusioned by the failure of medical treatment, Sprague became embittered by confinement. I am tired to death of taking medicine and never having it do any good, and think sometimes I will never try to do anything for myself again, she confided to her diary. Illness was a common, although not normative, precondition of mediumship. Sprague's experience suggests that spiritualism may have been made more attractive by the failure of other sources of healing. Not accept her illness complacently, she rebelled against the role of invalid. Unable to walk, she rode horseback. Sprague relished this one form of independent action that allowed a temporary respite from her usual state of immobility and dependence. Riding horseback yet, she wrote on 10th July 1849, not taking for granted that she would be able to continue. Enjoy it better than anything else. The following October, she was thrown from her horse while out riding alone. Unable to remount unaided, she lay in the field until a man from a nearby farm helped her back onto the horse. This incident is one of the few recorded humorously in her journal. Unconcerned about her potential danger as an immobilized woman lying in a field away from home, her only worry was to conceal the event. She found this display of helplessness embarrassing and probably feared that, if it were discovered, she would lose her one remaining source of independence. Having taught school from the age of 12, yeah, she did, Sprague was accustomed to being the sole authority in the classroom as well as contributing financially to her impoverished family. In this role, Sprague enjoyed the maximum degree of autonomy available to a young woman in a mountain village in Vermont. Sprague's illness changed her from one of the most independent women in Plymouth to one of the most dependent. Instead of keeping a school where she was the mistress, she was now confined to a room in her mother's house. Her diary suggests that she found her dependence a greater trial than the physical suffering caused by her disease. She never complained of being in pain, even to her private diary. Her only references to the state of her health refer to the outcome of medical treatment or to her ability or inability to perform some action, to walk, to write, or to sew. Come on, get on there. Sprague repeatedly lamented that her confinement was especially difficult to bear because it dashed the bright hope she had held for her future. Why can't I crush this insatiate urge for a life of action, this thirsting for knowledge? She asked her diary. Her thirst for action and knowledge suggests that she aspired to some role beyond the domestic sphere even before she became a trance speaker, but she never revealed what that bright hope might be. Instead, she asked, "Am I unreasonable that I cannot be happy? Is it the result of a complaining spirit that can never be satisfied? Are not poverty and sickness and the almost daily expectation of death in our circle enough to crush the heart's first freshness of hope in life? Is not this feeling of helplessness, this consciousness of being a burden to everyone, enough to crush the proudest spirit?" By 1850, Sprague had exhausted the alternatives offered by antebellum medical practitioners and had given up hope of regaining her health. On 4 July, she reflected bitterly on Independence Day. How many who celebrate it realize their entire dependence upon each other and their Creator? Finally, a few days later, she asked, "What hope is there for me but in death? If I could know for sure that death would bring the higher sphere, I would long for it." One of the last diary entries before her conversion to spiritualism recounts a discussion among us as to whether spirits could communicate with mortals. She found the conversation inspiring, and as a result wrote a poem for a friend whose mother had recently died. The discussion took place at the time that news of the Rochester rappings was spreading throughout the country. Sprague was quite receptive to the concept of spiritualism. "'Tis a beautiful idea that our departed friends are around us and with us, that they can come back to guard us from temptation, to soothe us in affliction, and win us from sin," Sprague wrote in her journal. "But if true, could the world be so sunk in wickedness? Yet it is not their influence when better thoughts to the heart come back, which had almost yielded to sin." During the last years of her illness, Sprague made no entries in her journal. The disease that crippled her joints may have rendered her unable to hold a pen, or she may have lost interest out of despair. Finally, she lifted her pen again. "After 3 years' silence, I unfold these pages once more to trace upon their surface the thoughts of a long-tried heart." Sprague wrote, "How lonely, dark, desolate have passed these years of confinement, pain, suffering. But now, she told her diary, she was beginning to recover the use of her body. She began to have hope for the future, which had appeared so dark. Although Sprague dated her cure to the winter of 1853, months passed before she was strong enough to leave her room. As soon as her health started to improve, she began to receive communications from the spirits to whom she attributed her recovery. They moved her hand to write beatific visions, prophesying an end to her suffering. "Come forth from thy darkness, O thou child of sorrow," the spirits called to Sprague. Through her own hand, "Come forth, even though thy eyes are dimmed with weeping, for thy grief shall be changed into gladness. Even as the clouds of night have fled before the first rays of the morning sun, so shall the dark clouds of sorrow soon vanish before thy returning joy." The spirits called Sprague to witness the revelation of divinity in nature. "How beautiful is the earth spread out beneath thy gate! How soft and yielding is the bright carpet beneath thy feet! Look how the whole earth seems filled with glory, lit up with the radiant sunlight." As winter passed and spring came to the Green Mountains, the spirit messages were fulfilled, and Sprague left the room to which she had been confined. "Again I walked in her fields, in the woods, in the valleys, and upon the mountains, gathered the flowers, listened to the music of nature, and found, like Mrs. H.M.F. Braude, that we are not lone worshippers in nature's temple. The beautiful and the good who have gone up into the great uncreated temples are our companions." Sprague's reflections on her state were no longer confined to the diary penned for herself alone. The previous statement appeared in the New Era, or Heaven Open to Man, a newspaper devoted to the spirit phenomena to which Sprague attributed her cure. The same spirits, the same spirits who freed Sprague from the chains of disease now inspired her voice. Within a year, she made her first appearance as a trance speaker. By the summer of 1854, she lectured regularly. For most of the next 6 years, she toured the country as a trance lecturer until her premature death from disease in 1862 at the age of 34. Axa Sprague's cure and adoption of spiritualism includes several elements of a classic conversion experience. She had exhausted human remedies and viewed her situation as utterly hopeless until divine intervention caused a radical change in her state of being. Her account differs from that of a Christian conversion. In that it describes not a dark night of the soul, but rather one of the body. She is not convinced of sin. She never accepts her suffering as something that she deserves. Rather, she views her cure as a delivery from undeserved suffering, and therefore a return to the natural order that had been disrupted by her illness. Although a spirit message instructed her to praise God for her years of suffering, because she would one day appreciate them as the blessing of a life, Sprague professed herself unable to comprehend this message, the meaning of which would have been clear to most Christians. The non-spiritual aspect of Sprague's recovery is difficult to interpret in retrospect because of the limited description of her physical symptoms. The determination she evinced to remain as active as possible and to seek a cure makes it unlikely that her illness was psychosomatic. Historian Leonard Twinham's diagnosis of tuberculosis of the bone is also improbable because that disease causes irreparable damage, making a cure after 5 years impossible. A more likely diagnosis is rheumatoid arthritis, a disease that is not uncommon in otherwise healthy women in their 20s and that can disappear after an extended period of time. Arthritis, especially among young women, has been associated by doctors with repressed anger turned inward. In arthritis, the immune system, designed to ward off threats from without, turns inward and attacks the lining of the joints. For Sprague, the return to health represents turn outward, a shift from writing in her diary to speaking in public, a shift from the world of the home deemed appropriate to women to the outside. Oh man, why am I so yawny? To the outside world deemed appropriate to men. Sprague believed that continued improvement in her health depended on her carrying out the Spirit's instructions to spread the news of Spirit communication through trance lectures. In a long poem, The Angel's Visit, Sprague recounted her illness, cure, and entrance into the lecture field. The first pages of the poem describe a familiar image from her diary, a young girl in a darkened room, chained by disease, a living tomb. The poem goes on to trace the connections in Sprague's mind that bound together her cure, the message of spiritualism, and her mediumship. And stronger grew her from each day, all pain and languor swept away, until like some neglected lute, with broken strings all sadly mute, that some kind hand has turned again, and waked to old familiar strain, her heart vibrated, and each string seemed swept by angels' starry wings, and gave forth songs whose every tone was waked by angel hands alone. She spoke such words of heavenly truth and life as fitted not her youth, and taught of angel God in heaven, and said that not one tie was riven. When loved ones called away from earth, awake in heaven to purer birth, but that they come in love to point the weary heart above, to light with hope each weary eye, and teach the soul not die. Sprague's life as a lecturer could not have contrasted more starkly with her former confinement. Within a few months of her first lecture, she was filling halls in Boston, where local spiritualists implored her to extend her visit. Within a year, she had addressed overflowing halls as far away as Michigan, and speaking engagements eventually took her to Baltimore, Philadelphia, and throughout the Midwest. From complete dependence, she attained a remarkable degree of independence for a woman of her day, supporting herself with lecture fees and traveling alone from state to state. From despondence and hopelessness, she became an enthusiastic proponent of a cheerful message, with hundreds of admirers whose letters confirmed that she did, in fact, light with hope each weary eye. As a trance speaker, Sprague embodied in her life the optimistic doctrines of her adopted faith. Sprague was in great demand as a speaker. Miss Sprague is our... All right, my camera's messing up. There we go. Miss Sprague is our criterion as to all that is good, great, eloquent, and beautiful, wrote the man responsible for procuring spiritualist lectures in Terre Haute, Indiana. Our people in Utica have fallen more deeply in love with you than before, wrote another lecture committee, entreating her to return to their city for another month. Many communities felt that the success of the movement in their area depended on Sprague's appearance. The more I talk with the members of our church, the stronger is my conviction that you are the only one that can give full satisfaction in our pulpit, wrote Benjamin Starbuck from Troy, New York. Miss Sprague is the one we must have, echoed the spiritualist of Burlington, Vermont. While some communities tried unsuccessfully to woo her with economic incentives, she insisted that she must go where her spirits directed, rather than where she would receive the largest sum. She refused several requests that she speak at the prestigious Dodsworth Hall in New York City. A friend noted Sprague's expanding career in 1858, but commented, "I know you do not do it except from principle. For your fame would become the more widespread did you seek the more conspicuous places, the cities. Much of Sprague's surviving correspondence consists of letters from spiritualists inviting her, sometimes begging her to lecture in their towns for periods ranging from 1 week to 2 months. Towns with spiritualist groups normally asked her to come for a month. She was expected to speak in the principal town that invited her each Sunday and in smaller settlements in the vicinity during the week. The more Sprague traveled, the more word spread of her talents, and the demand for her services grew apace. She received 57 requests to speak in 1858, 71 in 1859, and 88 in 1860. These figures include only invitations for individual speaking engagements, not requests to speak at funerals or at many spiritualist conventions at which she was a featured speaker. Guest appearances had to be coordinated with her regular appointment, speaking every other Sunday in South Reading. In her effort to reach as many people as possible, Sprague rarely consented to remain for a month in any location. Still, she could satisfy only a fraction of the requests. In April 1860, she wrote to the Banner of Light that all her Sundays were engaged until the following January. Despite her popularity, Oxa Sprague never enjoyed the renown of Emma Hardinge, Lizzie Doughton, or Cora Hatch. We may assume that the 15 or 20 spiritualist women who ranked with her in popularity were equally in demand as speakers. Sprague's popularity as a speaker reflected the powerful impression she made on her audience. Her correspondence is full of letters, such as one from Charles Townsend, husband of the trance speaker Malvina Townsend, who called her his spiritual benefactress because the first words that lifted the veil from my eyes and enabled me to discern, seek, spiritual things fell from your lips. A man who had heard Sprague speak often when she passed through his town wrote to her, "Often in the quiet hours of night do you visit me in my imagination as you stood inspired before the audience in our hall." What's that say? Gross? Why is that gross? On recalling her appearance as a speaker, he felt deep, undefined yearnings of the soul to speak in words of praise, of esteem, of affection even. Another listener who could not sleep after Sprague's lecture had a vision of her standing before the people. Other mediums evoked similar feelings. A spiritualist admirer of Cora Hatch recalled that her entrancing eloquence made his heart throb with sacred emotion. Emma Hardinge drew unwelcome attention from a man who claimed that his spirit followed her everywhere after he heard her speak. The independent woman, in the guise of the trance speaker, enthralled her male audience. The trance speaker's anomalous independence freed men from conventions governing their interactions with women, just as it freed women to address mixed audiences. Traveling alone, Sprague usually enjoyed the hospitality of the leading spiritualist family in the town or city where she spoke. Many of these families became devoted friends who constantly urged her to return. It was not unusual for the head of the family to be smitten with the itinerant female lecturer. Not any altar, nor quiet rocks and mountains stern were aught to me without the living, visible spirit of the enchantress, whose presence is everywhere, and whose wand has quickened everything with new life and beauty, and made everything vocal with music and instruction, wrote an admirer in Wisconsin. Some male correspondents expressed concern over the propriety of stating the depth of their feelings for Sprague, but they risked criticism and did it anyway. One married spiritualist described his reaction to her lecture. "I never felt so much like worshiping a mortal as I did you for the intelligence that spoke through you, not for yourself. Although I might agree with a young man if he said you was a very comely and rather good-looking young lady, but as a spiritualist, I felt that I saw an experience of that same power that worked so wonderfully upon the minds of the early Christians, which they called miraculous." What's this say? Man, still, I don't care what the footnote is. As these statements testify, the visual image of a medium as she stood on the platform made an enduring impression on the audience. N.P. Willis's description of Cora Hatch standing alone in the pulpit, her delicate bare arm raised in a clergyman's attitude of devotion, suggests the double impact of the medium's appearance. In addition to spiritual inspiration, trance speakers provided mid-century men with a rare opportunity to look unrestrained at an unknown woman. According to the mores of the time, do not fall off here, please. Male audiences probably understood the willingness of a medium to appear in public, a measure shunned by any woman with a modicum of modesty, as implying consent to be stared at. Unlike Reform women, trance speakers did not dress in a manner designed to dispel this impression. Reformers favored sober Quaker-style garb. They rejected well-known author Elizabeth Oakes Smith as president of the 1852 National Women's Rights Convention because she appeared in a fashionable dress that left both neck and arms exposed. Susan B. Anthony, outraged by Smith's appearance, argued that nobody who dressed as she did could represent the earnest, solid, hard-working women of the country for whom they were making the demand for equal rights. A popular photograph, see Plate 9, shows Cora Hatch in just such a dress as the one that evoked Anthony's ire. Let's look at it, because I've already seen it, but Cora Hatch was only 17 at the time, it said. Where's the other girl? Yeah, she was good looking. I mean, 17, but good looking. Where's this other? There's Sprague. She's not. Yeah, she's good looking, I guess, in sort of a gothic way. A popular photograph shows it depicts her as Willis remembered her, face upturned to heaven, flaxen ringlets flowing over bare shoulders. In addition, Hatch always wore a white rose in her belt. Were I a medium lecturer female, I would dress so as not to attract attention with outlandishness, in hat, frock, wristbands, and country girl flamishness, advised one of Oxa Sprague's most avid admirers. He criticized her for wearing innumerable flashy ribbons on her wrist and a hat with northern light streaks. Sprague's daguerreotype portrait, see Plate 10, does not reveal the color of her dress, but it shows contrasting stripes of at least 3 hues, suggesting a combination of bright colors that contemporaries might have associated with country girl flamishness, or is that flamishness? Presumably, Sprague would not have elicited such fatherly advice had her appearance met her friend's standards of modesty. The public display of a colorfully dressed, unconscious woman provided potent material for the imaginations of the male audience. Again, unlike Reform women, the public appearance of mediums did not conflict with the passivity believed to characterize female sexuality, because they were understood to be unconscious. Abolitionist women were dismissed by many as traitors to their sex because they dared to stand up in public to espouse radical political views. Derisive observers commented on Susan B. Anthony's broad shoulders and suggested that the practice of women speaking in public would give rise to a third sex. But they weren't wrong. They weren't wrong. But neither men nor women questioned the femininity of the beautiful Cora Hatch, ringlets bobbing about her youthful face as she expounded visions of angels. In addition to the many friends and admirers Oxa Sprague met during her lecture tours, other men sought her acquaintance through the mail. To a Mr. Stone who asked to correspond with her, she replied that she was happy to correspond with anyone about spiritualism. Apparently, he also asked for information that she deemed overly personal. She wrote sarcastically, "I have nothing to say about myself except that I am as ugly looking as nature could make me. And as for my real self, the internal, I shall let you draw your own conclusions from my style of writing. as I, of course, shall take the same liberty with regard to you. She was indignant when Mr. Stone sent stamps to encourage her correspondence. I have almost a mind to send those stamps back. I wish to pay the postage on my own letters. Perhaps you don't know I am an advocate of women's rights. Now, don't faint away. Mr. Stone may indeed have fainted, for although Sprague assured him that she never dropped a correspondent lightly, this shocking revelation concluded their brief exchange. Sprague corresponded at greater length with men who shared her enthusiasm for women's rights. The radical Elmer Loudon wrote from Indiana, "The female is taught by our theological teachers the ridiculous idea that the woman must keep silent in public, and if she will learn anything, let her ask her drunken husband at home." Loudon, who was a frequent correspondent in 1858, had never met Sprague but wanted to after reading her articles in spiritualist papers. Only after commencing correspondence did he learn from the papers that she was a trance speaker. He so admired her views that he read one of her articles aloud to a crowd of 30 people. "I am glad to learn that you are still keeping the world of thought agitated by your fearless independence," he wrote to her in May. "Oh, that there was 1,000 more of the female sex to take the stand you have taken." In October, he proposed marriage to Sprague in a letter, although there is no record that they had ever met. He had not been enchanted by her appearance on the platform since he had never seen her, but the mere knowledge that she was a lecturer and did not keep silent in public added to her appeal. Himself a trance speaker, he felt that it would be adding to our present and future happiness to unite our interests as one, whereas marrying another woman would probably have entailed giving up the freedom of his mobile style of life. Marriage to the itinerant Sprague would not have interfered with his own career. He was clearly attracted by the fact that she shared the radical views about woman's role and about the relations of men and women. How many more pages do I got? A lot. So I got to get to the... Holy shit. I got a lot of pages. Sprague's correspondence contains 5 proposals of marriage, 3 of which arrived in a single 2-week period. This count includes only suitors who could not propose in person. Apparently, an independent woman on the public platform attracted many men. Sprague's admirers were enamored, but they were not frivolous. Not one writer responded to Sprague's colorful appearance without being moved by her spiritual message. The same J.F. Parker, whose poetic missives described his emotional response to visions of Sprague at night, wrote in response to her article, Reply to Funeral Rites, "I rejoice that you have the independence to plant yourself upon your interior promptings of truth and duty, regardless of the prejudices of the world. The clergy and those who have received their teachings must yet go to a woman's school and learn that it is not the mission of any single child of the Great Father to convert himself or herself into a hearse to cart about dead forms and ceremonies." Parker was engaged by Sprague's ideas as well as by her appearance. She appealed to her audience on more than one level. Why did Axa Sprague refuse the many suitors who hoped to win her hand? Although some of the proposals came from men with whom she had no acquaintance, others came from men she knew well, such as the one who wrote, "I have no evil design in caressing you in the way I do. It comes from the bottom of my heart. I have told you I loved you, better than I do all womankind." Sprague rejected matches that her friends and family viewed as desirable. "Now, don't you wish you had been good?" inquired friend and sister medium Malvina Townsend when a prominent Vermont spiritualist who had courted Sprague married a non-spiritualist. "Well, you'll reap your rewards according to your deeds," Townsend concluded, "so I'll not trouble myself." Sprague's brother-in-law thought the reform conventions she attended presented ideal opportunities for husband hunting. "You can't always be young and beautiful, so hitch on to someone soon," he advised. When Axa proved insusceptible to such suggestions, his friendly tone changed to recrimination. Your womanly greatness has changed to monstrous imperfection, he wrote. You never can love nor be loved like a whole woman in this life. While Sprague's male correspondents hoped she would someday find a man that will solve the mysteries of your dear self, her female friends were relieved that she avoided the matrimonial noose, believing that she could take care of herself without a husband. One thing becomes abundantly clear from the extensive discussion of Axa Sprague's marital status in her correspondence. She remained single by choice, a choice she was required to reassert repeatedly. Sprague was not impervious to the satisfactions a family might offer, but she viewed her mission as a medium as answering a higher call than that voiced by her earthly suitors. This sometimes seems like a wandering life, and the office of medium, a thankless one, she told her diary early in her career. Yet, I think I can bear much of suffering, much of sorrow for the sake of truth. She viewed the husbandless life of an itinerant lecturer as the opposite of the life of the female invalid. I do wish to live an active life and have that life one of usefulness. If I can but see the way that is right for me, I feel I could throw my whole soul into that work. Anything but a life of worthlessness, uselessness. Malvina Townsend, attempting to console one of Sprague's spurned suitors, articulated her friend's reason for avoiding marriage. She explained that Axa loved the cause in which she was engaged better than anything else or anybody. Sprague's effect on her audience was not limited to those who hoped to marry her. Women also found themselves drawn to her in unusual ways. Thankful and happy was I in making your acquaintance, for I feel that another bright star has been added to the galaxy, wrote Miranda Randall, who found her spirit attracted to Sprague by the power invisible. The visual impact of trance speakers was greater on men. Women, after all, had many opportunities to look at each other and to hear women speak in sex-segregated prayer meetings, temperance societies, and church groups. Women also had ample opportunity to observe men in public roles. No objections were raised to women's presence in promiscuous assemblies addressed by male speakers. But when a woman saw a female speaker address a mixed audience, she saw a model for the abrogation of the conventions that hedged her life in with limitations. Sprague's female correspondents looked to her as an example and as a source of support in their own pursuit of independence. A lonely young woman who wore the American costume and supported herself by working in a milliner's shop wrote to Sprague for advice about her development as a medium. I am impressed by my spirit guides to address you as a sister, an elder sister, hoping to get some advice from one who knows what it is to suffer for truth's sake. The young woman's description of her own persecution in her pursuit of mediumship indicates that her reference to suffering is a reference not to woman who has defied conventions regarding both religion and gender roles. Oh, okay, let me read that again. The young woman's description of her own persecution in her pursuit of mediumship indicates that her reference to suffering is a reference not to Sprague's extended illness, but rather to Sprague's experience as a woman who has defied conventions regarding both religion and gender roles. Sprague reassured one trance speaker who doubted her performance in public and arranged speaking engagements for another who was soon to arrive in New England from the West. Ermina Pollard, a frequent correspondent, admired Sprague's newspaper articles and hoped to publish some of her own. How I tremble when I think of the wide sea I have launched out onto. The feeble attempt to do good by writing for the public gaze seems at times very like a mountain. Sprague, who wrote easily and treated the publication of her pieces lightly, provided encouragement to a few women who hoped to write for the spiritualist press. One asked Sprague for technical assistance in punctuating a poem. Sprague's confidence in the public realm made her a model for women in a variety of roles. Women's letters, unlike those from men, recount the correspondent's desires to have Sprague's attention focused on them rather than to focus their attention on Sprague. I need someone to whom I can open my whole soul, wrote a woman from Springfield, Illinois. I feel that you will understand me. Another woman wrote Sprague. I felt very lonely after you left, and am still pining for your loved light and lively company. Sprague's successful public career brought out women's doubts about their own lives within the confines of the woman's sphere. After visiting Sprague in Vermont, Laura Washburn described her life in terms similar to those used by Sprague before she became a spiritualist. What I am, I know not, she wrote to Sprague. To me, it seems that I am doing nothing, and to feel thus hanging upon the world without ministering to its growth or in any way helping toward a better day is terrible. God grant that it may not long be thus. Women welcomed Sprague's religious message, which addressed their particular reservations about Orthodox Protestantism. While I shall ever cherish you as a friend, wrote a woman who had recently heard her speak, the teachings which have fallen from your lips will never be forgotten, as they have taken deep root in my soul. Sprague viewed her mediumship as a religious vocation, not a career. When a correspondent suggested that she join him in a business partnership to exploit her talents as a medium, Sprague was appalled. If money was my object, I might get 4 times what I do, she told the would-be entrepreneur. But money is not my object. I would be instrumental in imparting truth and doing good. If I cannot do this, I have no wish to do anything. Sprague asserted that her mission as a medium was wholly under the control of spirits, and that it would be useless for myself or anyone else to make any arrangements with regard to it. Unless sanctioned by the spirits, it would be of no avail. Sprague had a reputation for sincerity. Philadelphia spiritualist Cora Wilburn asked Sprague to address a small group formed for the development and improvement of mediums that could not invite speakers because it lacked resources. I venture upon you this request, wrote Wilburn, as I have read devotion to the cause and earnest women, or let me read that again. As I have read devotion to the cause and earnest womanly effort in your soul, I know many mediums are worshippers of Mammon, but I know too that you are not of that number. Sprague complied with this request. Other correspondents confirmed that Sprague did not choose her itinerary on the basis of pecuniary considerations. However, she made enough money lecturing to contribute to the support of her parents in 1855 and to accumulate $300 in savings by 1859, which her brother-in-law invested for her at a favorable return. Although much admired by spiritualists, Sprague had to endure the derision that met any woman who flouted convention. In The Angel Visit, she has the audience ask, why leaves she woman's lowly sphere to speak where crowds these words can hear, when all the men of God but say, she doth blaspheme, away, away. And thoughtless worldlings scorn to hear a message from the brighter sphere. Sprague departed from woman's lowly sphere because spirit guides explicitly encouraged her public role. 2 communications from spirits survive in her handwriting. Their messages directly contradict convention that viewed women as unqualified for public leadership. The spirits who signed themselves thy guardians left no doubts about Sprague's ability. Through thee come luminous revelations of divine truth to hitherto unawakened eyes, they assured her. The spirits were especially explicit about the legitimacy of trance speaking and about Sprague's effective use of it. Keys, silver and golden, are given to thee, that thou mayest unlock the treasure chambers of heart and brain, and lead forth, embodied and garmented in rich and varied speech, the loves and truths and joys of the inner life to the glad embrace of earth's children. Using the terms that conferred the authority of office on male religious leaders, the spirits called Sprague a teacher and a priestess, divinely ordained. They urged her to prepare herself for an active life, applauding her accomplishments, but informing her that she had more to do. Much have the sacred powers that guard and guide this lower sphere accomplished through thy organism, though as yet thy angel-directed feet have scarcely touched the threshold of the shining portals through which thy mission to humanity shall inevitably lead, said the spirits. The longer of the two messages, which continues for 4 pages, responds to Sprague's internal doubts about her mission. She's got to get past the mission. Her abilities as a trance speaker and the source of her power. The spirits assured her that they would never desert her, that they would support and empower her no matter what challenges appeared in her path. Dost thou sometimes forget that the power which now upholds thee is as divine as the divinity is divinity? They asked. Perhaps most important, Sprague's spirit guardians asserted that their assistance both provided the power that had allowed Sprague to overcome her debility and enabled her to pursue a path-breaking public career. When thou dost not feel the hands that ever helped thee, on why dost look back upon the darkened hours and say, they shall return, and say the power is almost fled. From thee it shall not flee. The doubts to which the spirit message responds suggests that Sprague felt the same insecurities that might be experienced by an antebellum woman who embarked on a course so precarious as lecturing in public. The difference between Sprague and other women was that in inspired messages answered her doubts. Begin as though thou lovest that work, they advised. We wait to help thee on, to help we said, for thou must act. The spirits counseled action, independence, and self-reliance. The Sisters Fox. Amy Kirby Post, Isaac Post. Margaret Fox, The Seance Table. The Boston Planchette. Fanny Davis, guided by spirit, plays organ and sings to comfort dying boy, though she had never played before. All right. Andrew Jackson Davis, prophet of the harmonial philosophy, and Mary Fenn Love Davis, advocate of spiritualism and women's rights. Emma Hardinge, medium and musician who became the historian of spiritualists. All right. There's Cora Hatch, the 17-year-old trance speaker who enchanted American audiences in the 1850s. There's our Gothic Oxa White Sprague, 1827 to 1862 trance lecturer whose mediumship ended 5 years of invalidism. Spiritualism, Miss A.W. Sprague. That's brilliant. Wish I could get one of those from 1856. Who's this? Spirit of Lightheart dissolving at the Eddy Homestead. Materialized spirit of Katie King with portraits of mediums Mr. and Mrs. Holmes, who deceived Robert Dale Owen. And Laura DeForce Gordon, trance medium who became a well-known women's suffrage speaker. Many more pages, all right. These documents depict the inner struggle of a woman at odds with the social strictures of her age. For Sprague wrote these messages herself while in trance. Both the doubts and the reassurance emerged from somewhere within herself. Sprague's spirit messages provide eloquent testimony that internalized conventions presented obstacles to the expansion of women's public role as difficult to overcome as external prejudices or restrictions. What doubting still, Sprague asked herself in the spirit message. It were as well to doubt at times as on to walk and think no lurking foe. There shall be snarls, there shall be foes, but when thou doubtest most, we shall be near. Even the spirit voice had to admit the dangers faced the woman, that dangers faced the woman who flew in the face of convention. But that voice, the inspired voice with which Sprague spoke from the platform, believed that these dangers could be overcome. The spirits kept their promises for 7 years, from her cure in 1854 until 1861. Axa Sprague traveled as a trance lecturer, frequently speaking in a different town every day in her attempt to spread the spiritualist faith. During the summer of 1861, while in Oswego, New York, to speak at a convention, Sprague was again struck by disease. While some of Sprague's correspondents referred to her fatal illness as a return of her original disease, others described it as a throat problem. If the retrospective diagnosis of arthritis is correct, then her final illness must have been distinct from the disease that caused her 5 years of invalidism, since rheumatoid arthritis is not fatal. In 1862, the beloved medium died at the age of 34, death bringing her career as a trance lecturer to an abrupt conclusion. But the admiration and devotion evoked by her mediumship were not easily obliterated. On the first anniversary of Sprague's death, Andrew Jackson Davis made a pilgrimage to her grave in Plymouth and described it for the Banner of Light. The Banner brought out a volume of her poems later that year. Demand for the book was so great that a second edition was issued immediately. In 1865, prominent Vermont spiritualists gathered for a special service commemorating the 11th anniversary of Sprague's first public trance lecture, and planned to do so again the next time the date fell on the Sabbath. 10 years later, the Vermont State Spiritualist Convention meeting at Plymouth included a memorial service at Sprague's grave. Lecturers continued to recall her indefatigable labors as a trance speaker many years after her death to audiences who probably had never heard her speak. As late as 1881, Sprague's spirit was cited as the author of a book received through a medium. Sprague was well enough remembered into the 20th century to be one of the few women included in the Dictionary of American Biography. Within a year of her death, Sprague's spirit began to inspire other mediums. The dead Sprague addressed her friend and co-worker, trance speaker Malvina Townsend, through the mediumship of Lizzie Doughton. Sister, one simple word, I love you still. My strength shall be conferred. Your need to fill. I come to you at night in some still hour and lend my spirit's might to give you power. After death, Axa Sprague's spirit empowered other women, just as her own guardians empowered her during her life. I'm sure they did. All right, that's all for now. That was a long-ass chapter. I hope my baked potato did not burn. Potatoes. This is a pretty good book. All right, that's all.